The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Staff Sergeant Maria walked briskly toward the training grounds. Her boots clicked against the concrete in a steady rhythm that had become second nature after 8 years of service. At 28, Maria was one of the youngest female staff sergeants in her unit, but her dedication and unwavering commitment had earned her the respect of every Marine under her command. Maria had joined the Marines straight out of high school, driven by a deep desire to serve her country and prove that women could excel in any role the military demanded. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had watched her father struggle to make ends meet after losing his job at the local factory. The military offered her not just a career, but a chance to provide for her family while doing something meaningful with her life. Her unit was preparing for an intense training exercise that would test their readiness for overseas deployment. The exercise, known as Operation Steel Thunder, would simulate real combat conditions and push every Marine to their physical and mental limits. Maria had spent weeks planning the logistics, ensuring that every piece of equipment was in place and every soldier knew their role. As she entered the command tent, Maria noticed the concerned expressions on her fellow officers' faces. Lieutenant Colonel James, the commanding officer, was studying weather reports on his laptop with a furrowed brow. The forecast showed temperatures reaching dangerous levels throughout the day, with humidity that would make the heat feel even more oppressive. "Glad you're here," Colonel said without looking up. "We're looking at some challenging conditions today. I want you to keep a close eye on the troops during the exercise. Heat exhaustion is a real concern, and I need someone I trust monitoring the situation." Maria nodded firmly. "Understood, sir. I'll make sure everyone stays hydrated and watch for any signs of heat-related stress." She had dealt with similar conditions before during her deployments overseas, where the desert heat could be merciless. But something about today felt different, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what was bothering her. The training exercise began at dawn with 500 Marines divided into various units spread across the sprawling base. Maria moved constantly between groups, checking on equipment, offering encouragement, and ensuring that safety protocols were being followed. Her radio crackled continuously with updates from different teams as they navigated through simulated combat scenarios. By mid-morning, the temperature had already climbed above 90 degrees, and the humidity made it feel like they were training in a steam bath. Maria noticed several Marines struggling with the heat, their faces flushed and sweat pouring down their uniforms despite frequent water breaks. She ordered additional rest periods and made sure medical personnel were strategically positioned throughout the training area. During a particularly intense urban warfare simulation, Maria received word that one of the newer recruits, Private Johnson, was showing signs of heat exhaustion. Without hesitation, she sprinted across the training ground, her full gear weighing her down as she navigated through obstacles and simulated debris. The young Marine was seated in whatever shade he could find, his breathing labored and his skin pale despite the heat. "Johnson, talk to me," Maria said, kneeling beside him while signaling for the medic. "How are you feeling?" The private tried to respond, but his words came out slurred and confused. Maria immediately recognized the symptoms of severe heat stress and began implementing emergency cooling procedures she had learned during her medical training. As the medic arrived and began treating Private Johnson, Maria continued coordinating the exercise while keeping a watchful eye on all her Marines. She had been on her feet for over 6 hours in the brutal heat, constantly moving, constantly alert, constantly putting the welfare of her troops above her own comfort. Her uniform was soaked with sweat, and she could feel her own body beginning to protest the demanding conditions. The afternoon brought even more intense scenarios as the training exercise reached its climax. Maria found herself running between multiple crisis simulations, each one designed to test different aspects of combat readiness. Her radio never stopped buzzing with requests for guidance, reports of equipment issues, and updates from medical personnel monitoring the health of the participants. During a complex rescue simulation, Maria noticed that one of the communication systems had failed, leaving a team of Marines cut off from central command. Without functioning radios, the team was unable to coordinate with other units or call for assistance if needed. Maria knew that in a real combat situation, this type of communication breakdown could be fatal. She immediately began working to restore the communication link, troubleshooting the technical issues while simultaneously coordinating backup communication methods. Her expertise with military communications equipment, gained through years of experience and additional training, proved invaluable as she identified and began fixing the problem. As she worked, Maria felt a strange sensation beginning to build in her chest. At first, she attributed it to the stress of the demanding day and the oppressive heat. But as the feeling intensified, she realized something was seriously wrong. Her vision began to blur slightly, and she felt an unusual weakness in her legs that had nothing to do with fatigue. Despite the warning signs her body was sending, Maria pushed through her discomfort. She had a responsibility to her Marines, and she was determined to ensure their safety regardless of how she was feeling. This dedication to putting others first had always been one of her defining characteristics, both as a Marine and as a person. The communication system finally came back online just as Maria felt the first sharp pain shoot through her chest. She managed to confirm that all units were back in contact with Central Command before the pain intensified dramatically. Her breathing became labored, and she realized with growing alarm that this was not heat exhaustion or simple fatigue. Maria tried to call for help, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The noise of the training exercise around her masked any sounds she might have made. She looked around desperately for someone nearby who could assist her, but all the Marines in her immediate vicinity were focused on their training objectives and had not yet noticed her distress. The world around Maria began to tilt and spin as she fought to remain conscious. She thought about her family back in Texas, about her Marines who were depending on her, and about all the dreams she still hoped to achieve. With her last conscious thought, she managed to activate her emergency beacon, sending a distress signal that would alert medical personnel to her location. Staff Sergeant Maria collapsed onto the hot concrete of the training ground, her body finally succumbing to the medical emergency that had been building throughout the day. The sound of her equipment hitting the ground finally caught the attention of nearby Marines, who immediately rushed to her aid while calling for emergency medical assistance. The training ground erupted into controlled chaos as Marines rushed toward the fallen figure of Staff Sergeant. Corporal Martinez, who had been the first to spot her collapse, was already on his radio calling for immediate medical evacuation, while other Marines formed a protective circle around their unconscious leader. "Medic, we need a medic now," shouted Private First Class, his voice carrying across the training area with an urgency that made everyone within earshot stop what they were doing. The careful choreography of the training exercise suddenly shifted as word spread that one of their own was in serious trouble. Chief Petty Officer Sarah, the senior medical officer on site, arrived within minutes, her medical team close behind carrying emergency equipment. She quickly assessed Maria's condition, checking vital signs while her team prepared to stabilize her for transport. Maria's pulse was rapid and irregular, her breathing shallow, and her skin had taken on an alarming pallor. "We're looking at cardiac event," Chief announced to her team, immediately beginning emergency protocols. "Get the portable defibrillator ready and prepare for immediate transport to the base hospital." The Marines surrounding them stepped back to give the medical team room to work, but none of them moved very far. They wanted to stay close to their staff sergeant, to somehow will her back to consciousness through their presence. Lieutenant Colonel arrived at the scene as the medical team was preparing Maria for transport. His usual commanding presence seemed diminished as he watched one of his finest officers fighting for her life. He had served with for 3 years and had come to rely on her expertise, dedication, and natural leadership abilities. She was not just an excellent Marine. She was someone he had been grooming for promotion to higher ranks. "Colonel, we need to get her to the cardiac unit immediately," Chief reported while monitoring Maria's vital signs. "She's stable for now, but this is serious. We're dealing with what appears to be a massive heart attack, complicated by the extreme heat and physical stress of the day." As the ambulance arrived and the medical team loaded Maria onto a stretcher, something remarkable began to happen. Without any orders or formal organization, Marines from across the training ground started making their way toward the ambulance. They came from every unit, every rank, and every background. Some had served with directly, while others knew her only by reputation, but all of them understood that she represented something important about their shared values and commitment to service. Sergeant Major Williams, a 20-year veteran who had seen many Marines come and go, stood among the gathering crowd and felt something he had rarely experienced in his long career. The spontaneous gathering of these Marines was not just about one person. It was about the recognition of someone who embodied everything they aspired to be as service members. The ambulance departed for the base hospital with Chief and her team continuing to monitor Maria's condition during transport. Left behind on the training ground, the 500 Marines found themselves facing an unplanned moment of unity. Without discussion or formal arrangement, they began to form informal groups, sharing stories about Staff Sergeant and the impact she had made on their lives and careers. Private Johnson, the young Marine whom Maria had helped earlier that day when he was suffering from heat exhaustion, stood with tears in his eyes as he recounted how she had potentially saved his life. "She didn't just call for a medic," he told the group around him. "She stayed with me, made sure I was okay, and kept checking on me throughout the rest of the day. That's the kind of leader she is." Corporal Davis, who had served under Maria's command during a previous training exercise, shared how she had helped him overcome his fear of heights during rappelling training. "Staff Sergeant never gave up on anyone," he said. "She saw potential in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. She made me believe I could do things I never thought possible." News of Maria's collapse spread quickly throughout the base, reaching Marines who were not part of the training exercise. Many of them began making their way to the hospital, wanting to show their support and concern for someone who had earned their respect through her actions rather than just her rank. The hospital staff had to manage an unprecedented number of visitors, all wanting to know about Maria's condition and how they could help. At the base hospital, the cardiac team worked frantically to stabilize Maria's condition. Dr. Michael Roberts, the chief cardiologist, quickly determined that she had suffered a massive heart attack caused by a previously undiagnosed congenital heart condition. The extreme physical stress of the day, combined with the oppressive heat and her unwavering commitment to putting her duties first, had triggered the cardiac event. "She's young and strong, which is working in her favor," Dr. Roberts explained to Colonel, who had rushed to the hospital. "But this is a serious condition that will require immediate surgery and extensive recovery time. We need to operate within the next few hours to give her the best chance." As word of Maria's condition and the need for surgery spread, something extraordinary began happening at the hospital. Marines started arriving not just to visit, but to offer whatever support they could provide. Some offered to donate blood, others volunteered to help with logistics, and many simply wanted to be present to show their support for someone who had always been there for them. The hospital's family waiting area, designed for perhaps 20 people, soon overflowed with Marines in uniform. They filled the hallways, the cafeteria, and even gathered outside in the hospital courtyard. Hospital staff, initially concerned about managing such a large number of visitors, soon realized that these Marines were self-organizing and helping rather than hindering the medical team's efforts. Master Sergeant, who had served as Maria's mentor when she first arrived at the base, took informal charge of coordinating the Marines who had gathered at the hospital. She established a communication network to keep everyone updated on Maria's condition while ensuring that the hospital staff could work without interference. Her organizational skills, learned from years of military experience, proved invaluable in managing the concerned crowd. "Has touched all of our lives in some way," Master Sergeant addressed the assembled Marines. "Right now, the best thing we can do for her is to be here to show her that she's not alone and to demonstrate the same kind of commitment to her that she has always shown to each of us." As evening approached, the number of Marines at the hospital continued to grow. Some had driven from other bases after hearing about Maria's condition through military communication networks. Others had arranged for emergency leave to be present during this critical time. The gathering was becoming something unprecedented in the experience of the hospital staff and the local military community. Dr. Roberts emerged from the operating room after 6 hours of surgery, his scrubs showing the signs of the intense work required to save Maria's life. Colonel and Master Sergeant approached him immediately, their faces showing the strain of hours of waiting and uncertainty. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Roberts announced, bringing immediate relief to everyone within earshot. "We were able to repair the damage to her heart and install a pacemaker to regulate her rhythm. She's stable now, but she'll need extensive recovery time and will likely face medical retirement from active duty." The news of Maria's successful surgery spread through the crowd of Marines like a wave, bringing cheers and tears of relief. Many of them had been prepared for the worst, knowing that cardiac events in someone so young often had dire consequences. The fact that she would survive and eventually recover was better news than most had dared to hope for. However, the mention of medical retirement cast a somber tone over the celebration. These Marines understood what military service meant to someone like Maria, and they knew that being forced to leave the career she loved would be almost as devastating as the physical trauma she had endured. They began to discuss among themselves how they could support her through not just her physical recovery, but the emotional challenges that lay ahead. 3 days after her surgery, Maria slowly opened her eyes in the cardiac intensive care unit, her vision gradually focusing on the sterile white ceiling above her hospital bed. The steady beeping of monitoring equipment provided a rhythmic soundtrack to her return to consciousness, and she could feel the unfamiliar sensation of tubes and wires attached to various parts of her body. As her awareness increased, Maria became conscious of voices in the hallway outside her room. They were speaking in hushed tones, but she could recognize the distinct cadence and terminology of Marines talking among themselves. Confusion mixed with gratitude as she realized that her fellow service members were nearby, though she had no idea of the extent of their vigil or the impact her collapse had made throughout the military community. Dr. Roberts entered her room accompanied by a nurse, both wearing expressions of cautious optimism as they approached her bed. "Staff Sergeant, welcome back," the doctor said gently. "You've given us all quite a scare, but I'm happy to report that your surgery was successful and your vital signs are looking much better." Maria tried to speak, but found her throat dry and her voice barely a whisper. The nurse immediately provided ice chips to help moisten her mouth, while Dr. Roberts began explaining what had happened to her. As she listened to the description of her massive heart attack and the congenital condition that had remained hidden throughout her years of military service, Maria felt a growing sense of disbelief. "Doctor, when can I return to duty?" Maria managed to ask, though part of her already knew the answer from the careful expressions on the medical team's faces. The silence that followed her question told her everything she needed to know about her military future, even before Dr. Roberts gently explained the reality of her medical situation. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Staff Sergeant," Dr. Roberts said compassionately. "Your heart condition, combined with the damage from the cardiac event, means you'll need to transition to civilian life. The physical demands of military service would pose too great a risk to your health and safety." The news hit Maria harder than the physical pain she was experiencing. The Marines had been her life, her identity, and her purpose for 8 years. The thought of leaving the service felt like losing a fundamental part of who she was. Tears began to flow down her cheeks as the full impact of her situation became clear, not just the end of her career, but the separation from the community and mission that had defined her adult life. As if sensing her emotional distress, the door to her room opened and Master Sergeant stepped inside, followed by Colonel. Their faces showed genuine concern and affection for the young leader who had made such an impact on their unit. Behind them, Maria could see other familiar faces filling the hallway, Marines who had come to check on her condition and show their support. "How are you feeling?" Colonel asked, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "You've had half the base worried sick about you. I don't think I've ever seen such a response to one Marine's medical situation. The support you're receiving is truly extraordinary." Master Sergeant nodded in agreement. "The entire training exercise came to a halt when you collapsed. 500 Marines immediately shifted their focus from training to making sure you got the medical attention you needed. That kind of spontaneous response doesn't happen often in a military career." As Maria listened to their description of the events following her collapse, she began to understand the magnitude of the support she had received. The idea that hundreds of Marines had gathered at the hospital to monitor her condition and offer assistance seemed almost impossible to believe. She had always tried to be a good leader and fellow Marine, but she had never imagined that her actions had made such an impact on so many people. "I want to see them," Maria whispered, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I want to thank everyone who came to the hospital and showed their support. They've given me more than they could possibly know during the most difficult time of my life." Over the following days, as Maria's condition continued to improve, hospital staff arranged for small groups of Marines to visit her room throughout the day. Each visit brought stories of how she had influenced their military careers, helped them through difficult times, or simply demonstrated the kind of leadership they aspired to emulate. These conversations helped Maria begin to understand the legacy she had created during her years of service. Private Johnson, the young Marine she had helped on the day of her collapse, was among her first visitors. He sat nervously beside her bed, clearly emotional as he tried to find the right words to express his gratitude. Staff Sergeant, I know you probably don't remember because you were dealing with so much that day, but you may have saved my life when I was having heat problems. Maria smiled weakly and reached out to touch the young Marine's hand. I remember, Johnson. Taking care of Marines is what we do for each other. That's what makes this brotherhood so special. Her words seemed to provide comfort to the young man, who had been carrying guilt about whether his medical emergency had somehow contributed to her cardiac event. Throughout her recovery, Maria was amazed by the continued support from her fellow Marines. They had organized meal deliveries for her family, arranged transportation for her parents to travel from Texas, and even established a fund to help with her medical expenses and transition to civilian life. The outpouring of support helped her begin to process the emotional trauma of losing her military career while recognizing the positive impact she had made on others. Dr. Roberts continued to monitor Maria's progress closely, adjusting her medications and gradually increasing her physical activity as her heart adapted to the pacemaker. While her recovery was proceeding well from a medical standpoint, he was also concerned about the psychological impact of her forced career change. He recommended counseling to help her navigate the complex emotions associated with medical retirement from military service. 2 weeks after her surgery, Maria was strong enough to participate in a special ceremony that Colonel and Master Sergeant had organized. The 500 Marines who had been present during the training exercise gathered in the hospital's large conference room, which had been decorated with flowers and military insignia in her honor. As Maria was wheeled into the room in a wheelchair, still weak from surgery but determined to be present for this unprecedented gathering, the entire assembly of Marines stood at attention in perfect silence. The show of respect and unity was overwhelming, and Maria felt tears beginning to flow as she looked out at the sea of uniforms representing every rank and specialty within her unit. Colonel stepped forward to address the assembled Marines and Maria herself. Staff Sergeant, your actions during your years of service, and especially on the day of the training exercise, exemplify everything we value as Marines. Your dedication to putting the welfare of others above your own safety, your unwavering commitment to excellence, and your natural leadership abilities have inspired every person in this room. He continued, while your active duty service is coming to an end due to medical circumstances beyond your control, your influence on this unit and these Marines will continue for years to come. You have demonstrated that true leadership is not about rank or position, but about character and commitment to something greater than yourself. Master Sergeant then presented Maria with a specially commissioned plaque signed by all 500 Marines present during the training exercise. The plaque contained an inscription that read, "To Staff Sergeant Maria, whose courage, dedication, and selfless service represent the finest traditions of the United States Marine Corps. Your legacy lives on in every Marine you have inspired." As Maria accepted the plaque, she struggled to find words adequate to express her gratitude. "Being a Marine has been the greatest honor of my life," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Each of you has made me a better person and a better leader. While I may be leaving active duty, I will carry the values and friendships I've gained here for the rest of my life." The ceremony concluded with the Marines filing past Maria's wheelchair, each one taking a moment to shake her hand, offer personal words of encouragement, or share a brief story about how she had influenced their military experience. The process took over an hour, but Maria insisted on personally acknowledging every single Marine who had come to honor her service. In the months that followed, as Maria transitioned to civilian life, she remained connected to the military community that had shaped her adult life. She found work with a veterans organization, helping other service members navigate the challenges of medical retirement and career transition. Her personal experience with both military service and unexpected medical challenges made her uniquely qualified to support others facing similar situations. The story of Maria's collapse and the unprecedented response from 500 Marines became legendary within military circles, often shared as an example of the bonds that unite service members and the lasting impact of authentic leadership. For Maria, while the end of her active duty career was painful, the discovery of how deeply she had influenced others provided a foundation for a new sense of purpose and direction in her civilian life. Years later, many of the Marines who had gathered at the hospital during her medical crisis would still speak of that experience as a defining moment in their own military careers, a time when they witnessed firsthand the power of genuine service and sacrifice that embodies the best traditions of the United States Marine Corps.